this episode of Tell Me More About, I'm joined by Florian Cofar from Romania. Florian, welcome.
Thank you.
You're one of the speakers in this Monaco Congress, and you are actually the one talking about AI, artificial intelligence. Is it helpful for treatment planning in complex cases, was the title of your session. Well, you're the person we all want to talk to, right? You bring AI into implant dentistry. Let's start with the beginning. How did you ever get to bringing AI into your dental practice? Where did that start?
Long story short, we started a software company, I believe, in around 2016. And we did AI quite early. So if we think it's already like 9 years since we've been working on this. But of course, in the very beginning, there was we didn't have the capabilities or anything that we have today. We had the vision, we had the dream, so to speak, and we also had the naivety, because looking back, I think it was a really important ingredient to actually continuing on this path.
But just a quick check. Yeah. I thought I was talking to Florian Cofar, the dentist. Am I talking to Florian, the software engineer, or?
No, I am a dentist. This is correct, but I wear two hats, so to speak. So on one end, I am very much a clinician, and I see myself always as remaining one. But on the other end, not exactly a software engineer, but let's say pretty much I would say the closest thing that I do would be a product manager, even though my title is a different one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So fast forward from 2016, early adapter, to 2025. How are you currently using artificial intelligence in your treatment planning process?
Well, what we are doing is, again, using AI as
it's a super broad term, so I want to make it tangible.
Yeah, it's super broad, and I'm going to try to, on one end, just briefly explain, but without being too complicated. AI stands for automation. We are able to automate things, which is a good thing. And the second, we can solve more complex problems. And then again, the second question is, what kind of problems are we solving? Currently, we are able to use it in the design process, specifically be able, to render potential outcomes to the patient, like using it in smile design, using it to generate video output on smile design. And we're also using it to create a better canvas for visualization in terms of, we create this multi-layered virtual anatomical models, which I think they are key in planning. It's just change the context.
Two terms that spark my interest. A multi-layer anatomical model. Tell me more about that. But first you mentioned the video and the smile design. I think that's a novelty, right? What does that look like?
It looks like, so from a pragmatic sense, imagine that you have a single picture, and from a single picture, you're able to create not just a smile design, which is a rendered static simulation, but you're also able to create a before and after video of a specific smile design.
Based on a single photograph of your patient?
Not just the photograph, but also the design. This is key, yes. But the input is a single picture.
All right.
Why is this so relevant? That the design is part of the process, because usually, especially when we talk about generative AI, it's not like a magic uncontrollable thing. It's you have ownership over the design process. You choose and effectively own a design. And our job is to have a technology that is robust enough to preserve that design and render it in animated motion view.
Exactly. So I can see that part on the output side towards the patient at the beginning of the treatment planning. This is how you are now, and this is how it could end up. But then you say the design part is key, and I also built a multi-layered artificial.
Yeah. So just to add a little bit to that part, we use this traditionally, and this is very important. So traditionally, smile design has always been something that you only use in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow it's part of the problem because it's disconnected from the rest of the workflow.
Treatment, yeah.
However, that's the beauty of it now, because the way that we develop things, because we own also the 3D part of the technology, smile design will transcend to pretty much like a real-time in-face visualization tool. So it means anywhere in the timeline of a treatment, you're able to take something which is abstract for the patient, like an STL file of anything you want, and be able to convert it into something that is meaningful for the patient, which is how would this treatment, STL, proposal, whatever, impact, you. So this is, again, simply on...
Why is it important to also kind of do it midway? To show what temporary solutions might come up, or...
There's so many applications here, but it is always important, because at the end of the day, we, along the way, are going to take, clinical, we're going to go right and left.
Yeah.
And it's important both for us and the patient to really have, the same language. I think in communication, visual is the universal language. It's not English or anything else. It is visual. And if we don't have that, what you end up in is the patient or any of the stakeholders of the process imagining different things, and ultimately, then we struggle to put things back together. So practically, imagine you can visualize anything from, like a setup, a wax-up, anything you want, anytime, and you don't have any limitation towards what is present in the mouth, whether it's something prohibiting you from physically putting something there or not, which is...
That's the opportunity that you see.
Yeah.
How often do you come across cases where this is actually a challenge or a problem?
Well, that's a very good question, because honestly, additive cases, or if I am to respond with a question, how many purely additive cases do we have? And the answer is very few.
Exactly.
So majority of the cases, we always have situations where we would have to technically reduce things. And this is, again, part of a broader problem in the industry, because we tend to plan things in a way that we make them additive so the workflow is easier, which has its consequences. You end up with over-contoured pros. Consequently, the implant that supports them is going to shift.
Over-design.
Yeah. And all these things. So I think it is extremely important, and I want to be very clear here, is not that we have to eliminate physical prototypes, but we have to have a complementary solution when there is no alternative to, putting the physical prototype. And this is just adding, again, a safety layer to the process, which I think is very helpful.
I can imagine. Is it also a lot faster?
It is, yes. Well, if we if we consider this as the output being a mock-up, and by a mock-up I mean a picture or video of a mock-up, because that's how you usually end up having a mock-up, with a generative version of it. Pretty much right now the average computation time that we're able to achieve is, let's say, anywhere between 3 and 5 minutes, which is, imagine, not even being able to print a model in that time, not to mention all the other steps that you need to do.
Yeah, so it's super fast,
yes,
compared to that. You also mentioned the multi-layered anatomical model. Where does that come into play? Is that like the next step in a CAD design of your patient, or a virtual twin, or what does that represent?
You put it very well. So this has different names, and just to normalize the terms a little bit so we don't create confusion, you might hear this as segmentation, or digital avatar, or digital patient, or digital clone, or whatever. All of these things are more or less the same thing. And again, just for the clarity, there's multiple technologies out there that in a form or other will do this. Now, why is this important when we plan complex treatments? Because whenever you think about an implant, you have to think about a prosthetic and an implant design, because the implant is never, just the screw. So it implies this complexity. And if we think about it, what is the normal sequence in what we are known to do? So at least in the modern narrative is you start from prosthetic design, and then you go into implant planning, and then you execute.
Oh, and then, there's some soft tissue involved also.
Yeah. But
get perio in to fix it.
That's in the execution side.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So again, and very important that you mentioned tissue, because when you plan the prosthetic design, okay, what is your reference? You have an STL file, or even a model, because the same problem. And what does that represent? Is the outer surface of the whole thing. So you only have the soft tissue and the tooth that most of the time you will remove, right? Mm-hmm. So all the planning is based on the most volatile part of the data set, right? Because what will happen is the soft tissue, which you clearly touched, will be actually, sculpted by the future support that you give it by the future pros, okay? And many of those teeth which are there will be gone. So actually, we are making a lot of guesses on the layers we don't see, like imagine the crestal bone, where is the alveola, how is the alveola shaped, all the things that we are meant to support. For example, when you extract the tooth, it's okay, you end up with a void there, you're going to have an implant, and then if you just genetically understand that you need to fill out with the soft tissue or GBR or whatever, but with a multi-layer model, you will understand much better where you need to do that, how much you need to do it. Everything becomes more precise.
Exactly. Now, Florian, how is this different from just very digital planning? What I mean is, where does the AI come in?
Well, at this point, the AI does not come into any decision making as people would expect, at least not in how
you use it now. Yeah.
So in the way we use it now, imagine that we are just providing tools, but not interfering with decisions. So we are automating, let's say, the steps. Or to make an analogy, imagine that your planning process, if we are to speak from these three main actions, show something to the patient, do a prosthetic design, and then and you have an output. Always in the process, you will have a ton of actions that are boring, but have to be done. So you go to the next step. A simple example is, you have to, let's say, align models, do this, do that. So you can go to the interesting part where you choose your implant position, right?
Yeah.
Now, the way that we use AI at this point as a philosophy, we want to cut down those boring clicks and just leave the user with what is consistent and what is added value. This is not because we cannot replace that, but because I think it's also a little bit of like I said, philosophical or moral question. I want the user has ownership over the decision.
Yeah. I want to keep the professional in the loop.
Decision. Yeah, I think it's very important. Again, the user should be the guardrail. Yeah. Because having this much possibility, one of the questions that always comes up was at the end of the session was, how do you make sure that the user is able to deliver what he designs? Okay. And the answer to that is, you have to build a culture of people designing what they can actually do. So you don't want the ownership to be in the technology, you want the ownership to be in the user. And we can only do that if we leave certain, dotted lines.
So do I understand correctly that the current way you apply the artificial intelligence part is a relatively small application where you use the designs and actually make it generate the visualization or the 3D visualization and the video? And that's still a lot, but I was about to say not more than that.
Not more than that. So this is let's say it's an early step.
Yeah.
However, I would argue that it is critical because it makes a part of the process which was very random, it makes it very robust, and it gives an alternative in any scenario. And I think this is important. And of course, there's still a lot to go in this side. Yeah.
Now let's challenge you a bit on a few typical AI challenges. First of all, okay, now we understand where you apply AI, but still, especially generative AI, has a tendency to hallucinate, right?
Yes.
Because it takes a gamble and the output is not validated into real world possibilities.
Yeah.
Did you run into any of these challenges when developing this application?
This is actually the major challenge.
Right.
Okay? The major challenge is how do you make sure that it is robust enough, okay? And that's why in the way we did things, generative technically is a lot based, let's say, on the using just an illustration, okay? There's a ton of technologies out there that simply take an illustration and use generative and
To make it
create something that moves. And I think, of course, with the amount of information I can make public, the real thing where we, I think, added a lot of value and were able to make it sturdy is the fact that we included the 3D element of it. So the design part, which is a three-dimensional layer in essence, is the one that we are using to guardrail the output. So we make sure that there's always a controlled process.
Output, exactly.
Yep.
Did you run into a lot of trouble with Gen AI just putting out rubbish?
I wouldn't say as much as I experienced in the mainstream.
The ChatGPT tool, exactly.
No. I would say that I always like to admit, if you will, or think that we were fortunate enough to really find the sweet spot rather fast on this one.
Exactly,
It's
exactly.
not always, but this one,
This one worked.
came rather fast.
I want to throw another curveball at you.
Mm-hmm.
Some people say, well, if we create all these glittery 3D videos of what the end result might look like, we might be over-promising, or even unknowingly, but we as professionals might put us in a position across a patient that just, hey, you promised me this gleamy Hollywood video. Now I ended up with something slightly different. I'm not satisfied.
Yeah.
Because that's not the first time you get that
So,
pushback.
no.
So what's your answer to that?
So this interesting question is all about, again, whose side do we want to take? Because this is a side, there's a patient side here and there's a dentist side.
Yeah.
And you have an industry where essentially what do we sell to patients? We sell promises.
Mm-hmm.
No? You
Yeah.
ask a patient pay before they go
So
into
the
surgery,
kind of
before-
blurry, difficult cut drawing could be
No.
in the benefit because there's still a lot of open ends.
I would, again, I'm just building context to say that in essence, we are selling promises regardless, whether they are
true.
backed up by something visual or not. That's a different question. So you could raise the argument that what we are discussing now is happening as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
Only that the dentist somehow many times is protected by not committing to anything, hence not being,
Challenged by a patient.
challenged by the patient. So you could argue that somehow this would actually end up in the patient's benefit because it would really require a higher level of commitment, at least when you plan things.
Mm-hmm.
And my advice or my experience, not my advice, and here I respond as a clinician, the way that it impacted me is it made me much more mindful towards planning. Because but this again, I guess there's a moral element to it, because I tend to be the kind of person that takes a promise seriously. And then, of course, I will not do a shallow planning and then just, let's see as we go. It actually made me spend more time in the planning. Now, I cannot really go and say that this will be a behavior across the board, but I do think that it will reward people that behave like this, which I think is good. And I also do think that it will punish people that take planning and promises shallow.
Exactly, and take shortcuts.
And I also tend to say that probably is not a bad thing. Maybe it's not a good thing but
I can see how
Not a
it's
bad
neutral. And you share from your own experience the fact that I have such a lively generated video makes me think twice of whether I can really actually deliver this, and otherwise I shouldn't show it to my patients. Is that what you say?
What I say is that it actually makes me think very clear, or am I going to have that papilla there, or do I want to change the shape, or should I adjust? It makes me think in more detail.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, because usually in the past, a wax up is a long process. You end up with one design and then, that's about it. But
I can see
with this real-time thing, it really doesn't, you're not being punished in the planning process, not with cost, not with time. And I think that if you go down this road, I think it's a win-win for everybody. I'm not saying that we should render something that looks worse.
No, I agree.
However,
realism. That's what.
However, yes. However, we're also considering, because we can see what we are currently not live yet, but we have in our back pocket.
Yeah.
Has a certain of realism that might scare some people, and we are considering using, provisional and ceramics as for training, to have like different tiers of what we want to visualize.
Want to show.
Not just the end result, but maybe even like a provisional state.
Exactly, and then you're in that journey where you take the patient or the stakeholders, as you mentioned, all the way through the process. You started the conversation with, I started in 2016. We had a dream, we had a philosophy. Final question. If you look forward to our future EAO Congress in 10, 15, 20 years, what dream are you building? What are you working on?
That is, honestly, no, I don't think I can predict the next 5 years.
I'm not asking you to predict. I'm asking you to elaborate on your dream, your vision.
Yeah. What I really hope that I can leave behind as a legacy of the whatever effort and all that is let's say, first of all, on the whole data part, I would really like that the things we do are more tailored, because, especially if we talk about planning, I do believe there's such a richness of data in any patient, which is not being used, because we always want to go to a genetic middle ground to make one-size-fits-all kind of approaches because of many things, pressure economically and all of that. But I do think that technologies such as AI can provide a way in which we become more individualized and more tailored in what we deliver as an industry. And from a purely, actually from all aspects, from a biologic aspect, functional aspect, from aesthetics, of course, is just to value more the richness and the uniqueness of the data we use. I feel there's much more in that data than we're using today.
That's an exciting journey, and thanks for sharing these first steps with us. Yeah. We look forward to seeing you in the future and telling us more of where that takes you. Thank you for now, for this episode. Thank you for your time. And thank you for watching. Make sure, if you know anybody who's interested in the latest development in the application of AI in implant dentistry, where we are now, I'll date this session in 2025. Make sure you forward this video to them and invite them to join you on Monaco Online.